Mhm. Yeah.
Oh,
No. Yeah, go ahead.
question.
Yeah.
Um, do I pronounce your name John or Jan? What?
John.
John.
That's actually a big thing in my wife is British, right? And her
Okay.
mom and her aunt is like the worst when it comes to pronouncing my name. It's actually Jon in Swedish, but this completely I sound like I'm a Korean girl when they say it, and it's like oh I get all the different like pronunciations. So I've always said John because it's just
Just
easier.
clear
Also,
things up. I
yeah,
understand because people have mispronounced my name forever, of course,
I bet.
my last name, because it's actually Bohemian, which is now kind of Czech. It's actually Stetina, but in America we say Stetina, but most
Yeah.
people will read it as Stetina. So
Yeah, I think I probably said it twice, a bunch of different ways. Troy Stetina, Troy Stettin. I think Stettin is probably the most common way that I've said it throughout you. Because I mean, I've had your book since I was, teenager. So changed a
yeah,
bit since that.
that's how I grew up. That's how my family pronounced it. So
Yeah.
I guess I should stick with that probably.
Yeah, probably. It's easier. All right. Well, you don't really need any introduction, I think, for people on my channels. Let's just get started with, the first question. But I'm really happy you're here, and it's a big honor for me to actually interview. And
Thank you.
my first question is really when I first heard of you, what I borrowed a book from an older friend, and I've been playing guitar for like maybe 2-3 months. This was like in '92, and I think the first book was, funnily enough, Metal Lead Guitar #2, for whatever reason, and
You
that
started
tape.
on level two.
Yeah, exactly. So I was like, wow, this is really hard. What was cool though, and I'm not going to make this about me, but just you get some context, was that it's especially in hindsight, I realized like the, the sound quality of that recording is so much higher than most guitar instructional stuff, and especially back then. So I'm just kind of wondering, before we delve into how you got to your playing, level and all that stuff, but how did you get that recorded? How did you was that must have been a studio, right?
Yeah, it was a small recording studio, 8-track tape
Yeah.
studio, through a mixing board, outboard gear, recorded onto tape. I've gotten a lot of compliments over the years on that guitar tone in
Yeah.
particular. I have always been kind of crazy about the tone, and I just would be riveted to a tone that sounded exciting to me.
Yeah.
And if the tone is blurry or fuzzy, if I don't hear the pitch of it very well, uh, I, I've I don't like it. Now,
Yeah.
of course, in the '90s, tone changed on guitar quite a lot. Well, it started in the
Yeah.
late '80s with the thrash and the scoop tone. And at first, I didn't like those scoop tones because they're hard to hear pitch.
Yeah.
But of course, you get used to whatever you listen to, and now that's kind of cool. It's got a little more aggression in it. But the tone that I always used, it was largely it was about how the mics are in the room,
Hmm.
and so I experimented a lot with mic placement and getting a sense of space.
Yeah.
And so I think that if you're crazy about tone, I kind of go back and forth on tone because on the one hand, your technique is part of what produces your tone.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
And if you don't have technique that's going to work well, it's kind of like polishing a turd, is the colloquial term we
Exactly
use.
what I tell students as well. It's like they spend money on gear like nothing, but like, oh yeah, I don't want to buy that course for $100 because it's like that probably would improve your tone way more than any pedal would.
I agree. I agree. See, so on the one hand, it's like, okay, technique is way more important. And
Yeah.
yet, if I have a bad tone, I can't play because I don't like
No.
the point of it is we're producing music, we're producing
Yeah.
sound. And if I don't like the sound of it, what's the point? I
Yeah.
don't even want to play.
No,
So
exactly.
I got to get the right tone. But so I suggest to people not to go on the wild chase of tone and this or that magic pedal or that amp. And yet at the same time, what you do as an artist, you do want to gradually get more and more subtle, like subtle control, subtle sense of what produces what sound. And the deeper you go with it, well, nobody else is really going to go there with you
No.
exactly, but the cumulative effect of you becoming more and more controlling of the nuances of your tone will
Yeah.
produce an effect that people will notice, which is like what you're saying. It's like, ooh, that sounds really good, but
Yeah.
you can't put your finger on it. But
Yeah.
that's
Exactly.
kind of what that comes from, I think.
So did you practice a lot without an amp as well? Because that's something I've heard, anyone from Paul Gilbert to I heard a Vinnie Moore seminar where he said that basically said that, oh yeah, at home 100% of my practice is just acoustically with the actual electric guitar because he said I don't even think I have an amp at home. And I've done a lot of that myself as well. I found that's really really important. I don't know if you know, what you did during when you started playing, and if you did something similar, or it was mostly like through amps if you could, or
Well, we're going way back, and we go through phases as
hmm
musicians. And yeah, so I went through the phase when I was a kid in the late '70s, and I'm learning all this music. Um, I played through a little practice amp, didn't really have much gain on it at first, and then I got my first amp that had a preamp and a master, and this was
yeah,
awesome. For the first time, I could
yeah,
actually hear distortion. And then I got in bands, and I would sit and learn, these from records note for note. As I did all that, I probably used, a gain tone because that's what I was playing.
yeah,
There was no instruction back in the day. In fact, there wasn't even transcriptions. If I was
yeah,
trying to learn when I was a teenager and I was learning, Kiss songs, they're pretty easy riffs, and so I could pick them out by ear. As I was learning them, I learned pretty quick. I saw a transcription, and it was for piano,
yeah.
and they did slack tuning, and everything is shown. Oh, he's playing an E flat chord, and so they grab an E flat chord, open,
Oh yeah,
and it's like everything's wrong,
yeah.
nothing. So you have no choice but to develop your ear, which of course turns out to be in the long run probably the greatest blessing
Oh
because
yeah, for
you
sure.
don't develop your ear, you really stop yourself from
Yeah,
developing as a musician. So it was required. Um, to get back to the thing about playing without an amp, I've gone through so many periods in my life where because the vehicle of my music career became instruction. And in the world of instruction, so I write a book, I do a recording, but 90% of the creation of the content and the writing of the book is writing and thinking, not playing.
yeah,
So already I'm not really playing all the time. And I was in bands and stuff, tried to get that working, but those things, for whatever reason, everything I did in the instructional world, right place, right time, did great. So it became what worked. Everything that I tried in the other world always had a door slam or problem or
yeah,
whatever. Things just didn't work.
yeah.
In fact, it was a little odd how one side was so uh, rolled out so nicely and the other side was so blocked. And it didn't stop. Despite my attempts later and working with lots of people, in the industry and having all the reasons to succeed, it's still blocked. So I mean, who knows why these things happen? But here's my point: through the time I would play and I would have my chops together, and then
Yeah,
I would be writing a book or doing a transcription or doing something else, and I wouldn't play for a while, months.
yeah,
And so my playing would erode, because if you don't use it, you lose it
yeah.
to a degree, and then I have to get it back. So I've gone through 100 times where I've stopped playing and then I've got it back. The beauty of that is a couple things. Number one, it reconnects me to the learner.
Yeah,
Even though I learn fast, it comes back quickly. It's still the process. So it
yeah,
really focuses me on process. And part of the process, I would agree, is that a lot of times these days, if I want to sharpen up something, I will play without the amp because it really teaches you smoothness and it teaches
Hmm.
you how to play in a relaxed way and with an evenness of velocity
Yeah.
of strings. And that's a really important aspect to get down.
Yeah, because
So I
I found for myself as
yeah.
yeah, no, yeah, I found for myself as well where like even practicing with a clean sound on an amp can almost, if you have a really good clean sound, even that can hide mistakes or like hide the fact that your picking might not be as even as you think. But when you play just the instrument, it's like it is what it is, right? So I found that to be really helpful. But of course, you need to practice with distortion as well. But back to you started in the 70s, you said. How old were you when you started?
I think I was 11 actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you get
So
serious right away?
no, no, I was, you know, so I had played an instrument in band because it was
Hmm.
part of the school system, and I didn't, what they do, at least when I was a kid, um, they say, what instrument do you want to play? And all the boys rush to the corner to play drums. We all want to be on stuff.
Yeah.
And then the guy says, no, I'm sorry, we can't have, 12 drummers in the music class.
Yeah.
So, my there was a clarinet laying around at my house, and my parents said, "Oh, you want to be in band? Well, there's your instrument. That's what you're playing because that's what we
Wow.
have." So I was like, okay, I guess I'm playing a clarinet. So I did that a couple of years, but it taught me how to read music, probably developed my ear a little bit.
Yeah, for sure.
And then when I picked up the guitar, I started with one of those book ones, like
Yeah.
Alfred. I think it was Alfred book one, learning three notes on the first string. And, I did that for a few months. And then I made the leap to start learning these Kiss songs, riffs by ear.
Yeah.
And then it developed from there. So I was playing all the 70s, late 70s stuff. And it was not at first a real um, like, oh my God, this is my life. This is what I want to do.
Yeah.
It started as an interest, and I was curious about it. And I liked music, of course. I mean, I liked
Yeah.
the bands I listened to, and I didn't even mind playing in band in school. I mean, of course, that's a relative thing. It was better than the academic classes. I was
Yeah. Yeah.
less interested in them. So, you know, as a break in the day of doing normal stuff. And
But I
so,
think clarinet is quite a musical instrument as well. Without sounding too weird of a phrase there, but because I know in the Swedish school system when I grew up, it was like you had this big hurdle. If you wanted to get lessons, everyone wanted to play guitar or drums, right?
yeah,
And but everyone had to go. Everyone had to do during music class had to play the recorder, and that's
yes,
such a lame instrument that
yes.
it's like, do you really want to kill everyone's interest in music? It's like no one. I
This is
mean,
exactly how we're going to do
yeah,
it.
exactly. So clarinet is like the amazing instrument in comparison, I would say. So you definitely just having that and then starting on guitar must have helped you a lot anyway because you're thinking musically already, even though the instruments don't have anything in common really, but it's still music. So
Well,
and also reading music must have helped a lot, like
I think so,
understanding your
and
own.
I think so because fundamentally, music, any instrument is simply sounds arranged in time, and the
Yeah,
sounds are pitches. And so you've got a grid of pitch and you've got a grid of time, and that's what the staff is.
yeah,
And that's what tab is too, provided that you have time in
yeah.
it. Otherwise, you don't really have music. You just have
No,
a bunch of numbers that
yeah,
and
that's but you've always, I remember that you've always had the tab with the actual note, the
that's right.
subdivisions, and
That's
that's
right, because the timing is 50% of the issue, and if you
yeah,
don't make timing real by actually learning about timing and how the notes relate to the timing, then you're leaving it on the table, and what happens when people do that is they go through, years of playing where they're just kind of like trying to make things sound right,
yeah,
and they don't sound
yeah,
right, and it doesn't take care of itself for the most part. You might have that one in 100 person, One super talented person who just sort of gets, their ear is already developed, their sense of rhythm is already so well developed that when they start playing, it works. But for 99% of us, we need to take the abstraction of timing and get very
Yeah,
specific with it.
definitely.
And then another error that intermediate players make that gets them stuck is they might even learn about rhythm notation, but then they don't go to the next step, which is you got to get it out of your head and into your body,
Yeah,
because rhythm is felt, not thought. And as long as you're
exactly.
thinking it and you're not feeling it, you really don't have it. The thinking is a helpful tool to be able to move to the next step. But if you
Yeah,
don't move to the next step, you're still not there.
because I remember starting. I started at 13, and I started in a band right away because it was this like thing where you can sign up and start a band from the get-go. And you had a poor instructor having to instruct like 5 beginners in a
Yeah.
studio. So, I mean, yeah, not a great job. But anyway, so I did that, and I remember the drummer because we kept playing afterwards. And I remember the drummer like, you're playing out of time. And I was like, what do you mean? I'm playing the riff like it should sound. Because I didn't have that. I didn't
Yeah.
understand the subdivision. So once I understood subdivisions, like you said, it was like, oh, all right, there's an actual system to this. Now I understood what he meant with like, you turn the beat around. I was like, what are you talking about? So, but when you understand what you should do, you can actually start controlling it, and your timing, just by knowing that, I think your timing just goes up several levels. So I think that's crucial. I'm also wondering, like you said, some people seem to get it easier, but I wonder if they somehow have a representation of time of 16th notes or whatever it might be in their head, but they don't call it that, but they have some sort of grid thinking, because it's like, yeah, it will be tricky otherwise if you don't understand what you're doing at all. And I know you need to feel it, but I think it's going to be way easier to get to that stage if you know what you're actually trying to feel, right?
I
But
agree. I totally agree. You've got to let's put it this way. If Even if you feel time and
yeah,
you can play pretty well and you don't understand it, you're not going to have as much control over it or be as good a player as you would be if you did learn it.
no, exactly.
So it's going to
I
help.
agreed. But the fact that you did the clarinet and you learned how to read, did that did you get any formal training in like musical notation for the guitar parts, or did you have help with that when it came to writing your books? And also, I'm just thinking like now when I write my material, I just use Guitar Pro or Sibelius, and it's so easy.
Oh
Back
yeah.
then, what did you
Oh, I,
do?
I just hand wrote everything.
Oh my
In
god!
fact, I created the notational system, putting the tab
Hmm.
with the rhythm, because I mean, the publisher is Hal Leonard. They were the biggest print publisher in the world,
Yeah,
um, and they never did anything like this before. So
yeah.
in fact, um, they the first books that were in the 80s, they literally mocked up, you know, in an art department, and from my manuscript, and then we went back and forth to get like, okay, your fingering numbers are too heavy, and that
Wow.
it makes the page looks messy. Let's diminish the things that you want to be aware of them, but you don't want them accosting. You want to pay most attention to the notes and the timing of the notes, and
Yeah,
then we worked with that to really develop that system back and forth. Then, of course, I got myself a little word processor, a Mac Plus. That would be, when they first became a thing, like,
yeah,
I don't know, 1980. When did that happen? Probably late 80s. I got something like that. So I wrote speed mechanics for lead guitar on that. And again, hand wrote all of the notation
okay. I
examples.
was about to say, so there was just a text part you could do. You still had to do the tabs by hand.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
everything was done by hand. And then in the 90s, I finally upgraded to a computer, and I think I started using Finale for a little
yeah,
while. And there was a few books that I actually did the layouts for
yeah,
myself, because I mean I knew what I wanted it to look like, and
yeah.
instead of going back and forth, you know what? It's a lot easier if I just do this. Plus, I get paid for it. You know.
Exactly. Like, no, give me the money. Come on.
Why not? So, and then later, I got kind of tired of that, and you know, and well, and actually, I kind of got out of music education for a while in the 2000s, and then I'm kind of a latecomer back to the online world, and now I've got my music academy that I finally set up around the books, organizing them into a curriculum, because I did, you know, I've got all these books out, and each one is kind of a curriculum, but each one
Hmm.
is targeted, and so they're not like really all pulled together in a
Yeah.
holistic way. So I've kind of been doing that, and then I did, of course, the last book I put out last year. I'd worked on, frankly, for I spent almost 6 years, well, about 6 years writing it, and then took a couple of years for it to come out. That's the total picking control, which is kind of speed mechanics on steroids applied to a huge amount of material. So that's out. And in fact, right now, I am writing a book. It kind of came about because I'm doing a masterclass series called The Art of Picking. Well, the art of picking, you know, we can focus on one aspect of a subject. You know, you can
Hmm.
learn your music theory, or you can learn ear training, or you can learn the mechanics. But the truth of the matter is, all of it is tied together in
Yeah.
real music. You can't separate, you know, melody from rhythm because
No.
every melody has a rhythm.
Yeah.
You know. So we like to pull things apart intellectually, but the bottom line is we also have to seam them all back together. And
Yeah.
so here I'm talking about the art of picking. Well, yeah, we're focused on picking, but what we really then need to talk about is process. How do you develop the muscle memory skills? How do we break these things apart and seam them back together? That's what speed mechanics for lead guitar really is. It's the
Yeah.
process by which we break things apart and seam them back together, which I think was pretty groundbreaking because there wasn't anything out there like that. That
No,
was
it for sure is groundbreaking, and I want to get to that one as well because that one really has a special place in my guitar collection, because again, I got so lucky that that was basically the first book that I bought myself because I borrowed the other one. But the thing is, if I hadn't borrowed that the lead guitar number 2 book, I wouldn't have known who you were. But then I was like, who the hell is this guy? And he had the cassette in it as well. And I was like, what? Because when I started in '92, it was just grunge all over the place. And yes, you had all the shrapnel guys, but it wasn't like now when, you can go on YouTube or Spotify or Apple Music and get whatever you want to listen to. And I lived in quite a small town, so you had to order stuff and you didn't know what to order and all that kind of stuff, right? So hearing this kind of playing that, and it wasn't like he didn't say Malmsteen or Vi on the cassette, it said Stetina. It's like, okay, wow, who's this guy? So when I found the other book, it was like, awesome, order it right away, and that was such a game changer for me. And I feel like so lucky that I got that within like the first 6 months I started playing. So between that one and Vinnie Moore's first video, it really got me to understand that this technique stuff doesn't just happen by itself. You're actually allowed
yeah.
to work on it, which might sound stupid to people now, but back when I started, it was so much like, oh, talent this and talent that, and but when I could understand because I've been doing push-ups and stuff at that point, and saw like, oh, I get some muscles now. And when I realized I could see the correlation between like, oh, you can actually have a workout thing on guitar as well, and that helps your technique, and that's sort of allowed. So that book was
Yeah.
amazing. But what was the first book you started? What was the very first book you wrote, and how did you get into that to begin with?
Oh boy. Well, the first book I wrote actually never got published.
Oh,
So what happened was, I was teaching. I started teaching guitar at a little music shop, and I didn't. I the choices basically were I was in a band, and the band
hmm,
wasn't gigging enough to actually make a living.
yeah,
Where so you got to do something, straddle, and make some money. So I thought, hey, teaching is something I could probably do, and it's better than working at a job that doesn't involve
yeah,
guitar or
for sure.
whatever. So I started doing that, and I did that for about a year, and then we were this shop was selling a lot of Hal Leonard books, and so um,
What
The
year was this?
oh gosh, probably 84.
Yeah. So the whole guitar boom had started for real then with Van Halen, and Ingwie was just coming out, and I'm guessing it was a lot
Yeah.
of technical stuff people wanted to learn, even at
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah,
And of course that people are coming in and I'm teaching and at this point my ear had gotten really good because I was too lazy to learn all the songs on my own time. So I'd learn
yeah,
them on the spot. Oh, I hear the riff. Oh, this is how it goes.
yeah,
Or solos, break them down. So I was doing a lot of that. And I think, yeah, 83, 80, probably, yeah, it had to be 84. And the editor who was also the author of the basic uh, Hal Leonard guitar method
yeah.
and some other adjuncts. They had this system, and they knew that their whole sales hinged on getting teachers to use their products and getting teachers to know their products.
Yeah.
So he would go around once in a while and hit these stores that were selling lots of their
Okay.
stuff and say, "Hey, have you seen this? Have you seen this?" So anyway, we got to talking after he showed us the stuff, and I said, "Yeah, but that's not what anybody wants to learn that's coming to me. They don't care about any." I mean, I got a couple of people that would use that material, but you know, um, this is what they want to learn. And he said, "Oh, yeah, I agree with you. Why don't you write that?" Oh, okay.
Wow.
Well, he told me later that he had said the same thing to about 20 other people, and nobody actually did the work. Nobody, nobody wrote the books. But anyway, it was the best option at the time. I thought, yeah, I could put all this together,
Yeah.
and write this book. And so the first book I wrote was actually, um, I've got a cat that needs to remove
Yes. No
himself.
worries. No worries.
Get out there. Yeah. So um, anyway, yeah, I wrote this book that it grabbed like 8 solos, easy to a little, harder, 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 all the way up.
So
And
kind of like the metal lead guitar thing, but just
yeah,
earlier.
but I was using, material that people knew because that's what they wanted to learn.
Oh,
So,
actual solos from artists. All right.
yes. Yeah, and like something easy, something by ZZ Top, or something. Then there was something by Neil Sean, one of the Journeys, and it progressed. No, not long examples, but recognizable
Yeah.
solos. And then teaching them. So I wrote that book and I sent it off to them, and they really liked it. And then their legal department got back to them and said, "No, we can't do it because we got to license all this stuff. And by the
Mm.
time the realities are, by the time we pay that licensing, we don't have anything left to pay you as an author to write the book."
Yeah.
You know?
No, I think
So
that's a little bit surprised at first, but then that makes a lot of sense. Uh,
yeah. So then I started thinking, well, okay, I can't use copyrighted material, which is fine because I was not really a teacher first and foremost. I was an artist. I'm a
yeah.
guitarist and I'm writing my own music. So then the question becomes, can I write something that I think people would want to learn that would be, and I had written this instrumental tune that wound up at the end of those heavy
Oh,
metal methods.
Babylon.
Yeah, so I had written that and recorded it on a little 4-track tape thing, and played it with my band, um, just something to do. And then I thought, oh, there it is. That's the culmination. Then all I have to do is build them up to that point. So
That makes so much sense.
that's
Because
kind of how.
I basically revisited all those two books in particular because I mean, especially the second one, since that's where I kind of started. And I was listening, and then I'm like, oh shit, this song, because I remember hearing that, I was like, wow, because I was listening to Ingwie at that point, and I just discovered him and Vinnie Moore and whatever, and this was like right up my alley in that regard, and it was it's quite different than those guys, but it's still like. Uh, yeah, it's a very, very cool song, but
So
it makes so much
Ingwie,
sense though that you
Ingwie
build it
was
up to it.
never really an influence. We move through these phases. At least it seems that's what my experience was. I was in the phase, I'm learning all these songs, and then I'm in the lead phase, and that was Van Halen 1 and 2, and then Randy Rhoads, the first Ozzy stuff.
Yeah.
That was the stuff that really fascinated me at that point
Hmm.
in my development. And by the time Ingwie came out in the early-ish 80s, I became aware of his stuff. He he showed another side of technically what was possible,
Yeah.
which was significantly different. But musically, I found that my interest was not neoclassical. I
Mm.
played classical stuff. I was playing Bach and all that
Hmm.
uh, because I like that music. But the neoclassical, at least the way he presented it, seemed very limited to me because it was just the same cadences over and over and the
Yeah.
same noodling. And it's like, oh, that's really cool for, 1 minute. And then the second minute, not so cool. And the third minute, I'm bored.
Yeah.
So he was not a big influence. I was in a band and I think we covered Far Beyond the Sun off that Marching Out album, which is cool. That's the more classical of his
Hmm.
stuff, you know, um, instrumental. I really liked that. So it was good for chops. Vinnie Moore, and by the time I got into saw those guys, I was already kind of like, okay, I've been there, done that. I know what they're doing, and so it wasn't so fascinating anymore.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah,
might,
that's what I'm figuring though, because when Ingve came out, and then you had like Vinnie Moore, Tony McAlpine, all those guys, and I always felt it was a bit unfair. I mean, I'm being Swedish, so maybe I should be more like go Ingve, but 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 I always felt it a bit unfair when guitar magazines would compare like, oh, here comes Vinnie Moore, another Ingve club, because he's not, and also. I really do believe him when he says he didn't listen to Ingve. He listened to like Michael Schenker. You had Al Di Meola, and if you
yeah,
take all those influences and put it together and do it, with good technique and I mean, the neoclassical thing is what it is, but it's a difference. I mean, I just think people
right,
with bad ears can't hear the difference. They hear something that's harmonic minor, and then it's like, oh, that's like Ingve, because
right.
that's what they know. So I 100%
Yeah, and,
believe
and I
that.
could
So
see both what you just described to
yeah,
Vinnie Moore because Randy Rhoads kind of mixed metal and some of the classical influence, the
yeah,
purposefulness of his lines, and I really liked that. And
hmm,
Van Halen had a very different. He was not dark serious. Van Halen was bright and happy
yeah,
serious. And so you got these um, different elements, and I connected more with the classical stuff, which is why I went then. And of course, my mom was an opera singer, so I
oh,
heard
cool,
classical music in the house. And so, and that like 90% of it I didn't like at all, but 10% of it was awesome,
yeah,
dark, heavy, brutal, like it was great. It just
yeah,
needed some sort of guitar to push it over the top. So
yeah,
I was playing, Bach, Lute Suite Number 4. I learned that when I was like 18 because I could read music and develop my picking skills, cross string picking to do all that because it's classical guitar but I wasn't using classical technique. I did
no.
take some classical lessons for a couple of months, but
But I do remember you did that. I don't think that was a book, right? I think it was from a website back in the day. You did some a Beethoven piano sonata on like a
yeah,
guitar cover, yeah. And I
yeah,
always felt like whenever you do the classical stuff, it because I've heard a lot of people online do classical stuff, and it can kind of sound sterile and a bit boring. But you've always put that aggression into it, which I really enjoyed. It's like it sounds like it's your music in a way. And I think the same thing with
yeah.
like when you did the Caprice excerpt in Speed Mechanics. It's so much balls in that performance. So did you ever finish that, or was that as far as you went with that
Oh,
one? Because
I played about a half of those 24 caprices.
oh wow, okay.
I I've I never really had an opportunity to record them, and I guess I kind of lost interest, at a certain point.
Hmm.
Um, Beethoven, I don't lose interest in
Yeah,
because he's more of a composer to
yeah,
me. That the music is just perfect.
Yeah.
And so all I do when I'm, trying to play something like that, and in fact, I just played a live thing a few months ago where I played a shortened excerpt from that, and I take liberties with it to say, with this instrumentation, making the intensity of it, what can I do that is true enough to the original that it is the original, but it's also um, my expression
Yeah.
of what I feel that emotion, is. So, I that's what you're describing is, that tells me that I'm being successful at what I
No, no,
think I'm.
definitely. I really, and it's. I'm not trying to be a gushy interviewer here, but I always felt that's the difference when I heard you play the classical stuff. And like I said, the thing from Speed Mechanics, it was like so much attitude behind that. So actually, when I heard it on violin afterwards, because I have to get the.
Yeah, the
But also
original.
there, I realized like the 24 caprices, depending on who you're listening to, it's going to be wildly different quality-wise as well on violin, right? Uh, but it was I was kind of disappointed what I heard on the violin because like this is not the same intensity. So yeah, so really good job on that one. Uh,
That intensity issue, that's something that I always latched on. I don't really know how or why, but all the way back to the beginning, I always was aware of this underlying sense of energy
yeah.
in phrasings.
Hmm.
And that's what I always pay attention to. And so I
Yeah.
think maybe what's happening is that that's what you're hearing is
Hmm.
because I'm hearing that and that's what I'm putting out. And that's why also there are I've listened, of course, because I was playing a lot of the 24 Caprices. I was listening to a lot of different violinists to it, and there are some violinists that do it that do nothing for me. Itzhak Perlman nailed it. I mean, I feel
Yeah.
like his performance was right there. Um, so, yeah, I
What do you
really,
think about Michael Rabin? Have you heard his performance? Michael Rabin,
I
he was like
know is
he was. I think he's probably the most technically perfect I've heard, but he was. I think he was very. He was kind of a Glenn Gouldish character, very like in his own world and very, a bit troubled. And I think he died fairly young and fell off
uh,
the recording scene. But he was really good as well. But yeah, Itzhak Perlman is he's amazing overall. So yeah. So when you did that, by the way, did you obviously have the score available, but would you play along with the violin version as well, or would you just learn it and listen to it to get the phrasings, or what did you do to like try to get it as
well,
close to what you want where you wanted to have
I
it go?
always I always listen to what is it that this music wants to be.
Hmm.
And I feel what it wants to be, and then that's what wants to come out.
Yeah.
Of course, I pay attention to the motifs and the mirroring, and as they
Yeah.
shift, you want to do it in a way that it recognizes these similarities, so
Yeah.
that you can play off of those.
Yeah.
Uh, but at heart, as a guitarist, I have what turns me on is the intensity and the power and the precision of execution that is, complete, ideally flawless, and and has that drive in it.
Yeah.
So what I'm looking for is how I can put that into the music.
Yeah.
I don't really, uh, I didn't really listen so much. I guess when I was listening to different players do that kind of stuff to get a little overview, um, I would listen for what is the impact of this?
Hmm.
And if it fell flat, I ignore it. And if it struck a chord in me, I know, oh, that's an element that I want to try to execute better.
Yeah. But I think this
So
all goes back to you learning by ear as well, because I started that way as well. And I've had so many students over the years. I've been teaching for a long time, and that's like the thing that lacks for so many people, because a lot of people nowadays, even like on Instagram, for example, if I play some fast lick or whatever, and even if I slow it down, it's like you got tabs, bro. It's like, but it's right in front of your face, and it's kind of
yeah,
like if you can't get it from seeing a slow version, you're probably not ready to play the fast version anyway. But it's the whole, the everything is like on a platter for everyone now. So what I try to get my students to do is basically try to learn it by ear first, and then as a second step, go to see if, find a live version with the artist so you can kind of see where they were playing it. So you can check it if you want, and then you can check different tabs, whatever. So they can still use the resources out there, but don't go straight to it, because I think it takes longer to learn and you don't develop your ear, which is the most important thing. So
Yeah, Tab has this great ability to get you quickly to the mechanics of playing.
yeah,
And it's useful for that purpose. But if you're going to the mechanics of playing, you wind up becoming a player who can do the mechanics and is not a musician,
yeah,
because what you're really using the mechanics for is to create music.
yeah,
And if you're not developing your ear, you're not going to be creating music. You're going to be always looking at the guitar as a mechanical system.
yeah,
And that has its place. Speed Mechanics for lead guitar broke down the mechanics,
yeah.
for that purpose, because, if you want to master the mechanics, you need to look at the mechanics.
But
But
I do think it's very important that, sorry, but that the ear thing, right? Because I even if you have the tabs and you have all like do this and do that, if you can't hear that your hands are out of sync and you're sloppy and it doesn't sound like, I mean, if you listen to some really good picked lines from someone, then you get the sound like this is the way it should sound. And then because otherwise people wouldn't be sitting there, and you've probably seen this a lot with students, and they just play really fast and it's out of sync and it's a mess, and they don't even hear it. They're kind of impressing themselves by
that
moving their fingers. So I think,
that stunts people's growth,
yeah,
basically. It becomes a block and they plateau. And this, fundamentally, if you don't hear, if you're thinking in terms of notes,
yeah,
and thinking, well, I put my finger in the right place, and so I played the note, I
yeah,
did the lick, then you're really missing the point.
yeah,
Because the point is music. It is 100% sound. The mechanic is just a way of getting to the sound. So since the sound's what's important, if you're not putting your focus on the sound, you're doing it wrong, really,
yeah.
and you're limiting yourself. In fact, I'd say that uh, that listening is a skill that gets developed.
Oh, definitely.
And at the beginning, a player can't listen to what they're playing, because until it becomes muscle memory reflex that you no longer have to think about what you're doing, you can't listen.
No,
And that's the problem. That's why uh, lessons are a thing. It's
yeah,
because you can't improve if you don't get feedback of what's going wrong.
yeah,
You need feedback. Well, where's the feedback come from? Well, it comes from listening, and the beginner can't listen. So you need a teacher who can listen to
yeah,
be the feedback loop. And
100%.
then, more and more, as you get better and better, you can start listening more and more and more. I think a big thing that helps people learn how to listen is when they start recording finally.
Yeah,
And then all of a sudden they're like, shit, I thought I played that well, and I listened back to
yeah,
it. It
yeah,
sucks. Or how is it that you can play the same notes and one solo sounds lame and another kicks ass, you
yeah.
know?
Well,
Then all of a
that goes back to that energy you talked about as well. Where like when it comes to like, oh, that's a quick question. I mean, I know that the solos in the books are obviously they're written out, but it feels like the attitude behind them, it feels like it's improvised to begin with somewhat, because it doesn't sound dead, if you know what I mean. Because that's what it can sound like sometimes when, I know for myself, if I write a solo, it's harder to get that energy to it. It's harder to get that like the same intensity. But is that something you found yourself, or like improvisation, or is it just what you want it to sound like, so it doesn't matter if you wrote it or improvised it?
Well, everything that I compose, I suppose, has an improvisational element in it that
Yeah.
I've remembered. In other words, uh, in those solos that are in Metal Lead Guitar Volumes 1 and 2, they were composed solos because I knew, okay, I have to restrict myself to playing within certain,
Oh yeah, of
certain
course. It has to
things.
be level 1, 2, and
At
3. Yeah.
level 1, level 2, level 3, it has to progress, and
Hmm.
you have to work all that out, and then I had to write something that was musically viable, that sounded good within those constrictures. So
What's the hardest there? Is it the hardest doing the simple one, or is it harder to do like this kind of mid one where like where do I put like the what's the hardest lick I can put into this thing without it going over into like super advanced stuff? You don't want to have like a blue slope and then all of a sudden there's a black diamond turn somewhere, you know?
yeah, yeah. Oh gosh, well, I don't really remember how what was hard. I'm sure I had to take a number of cracks at a couple of them to get them so that I was satisfied with them,
Yeah.
as especially at the higher end. There is a different kind of technique to make easy, so-called easy or slower lines sound solid and good.
Yeah.
It's really, which comes back to rhythm. If you have
Hmm.
a good sense of rhythm and put groove into your playing, you can make
Yeah.
slow lines sound purposeful and strong. Um, I would say that to come back to your improv liveliness, creative
Hmm.
stuff, what I would do typically when I would compose, and I still do this, is I will listen to the bed track and I will just imagine what I want it to hear. So the
Yep.
music for me does not come from the guitar, it comes from here.
Yeah, that's
And
ideal,
what
right?
I've done is I've connected my ear to the fretboard so that anything that I hear, I know what it looks like on the fretboard, and anything that's on the fretboard, I know what it's going to sound like. So there's no
Yeah.
surprises, which means I don't play wrong notes. And that I've created a fretboard mapping system program to
Hmm.
teach you how to get the connection.
Yeah.
That's also something that develops if you develop your ear, like you were talking about. And if you take the tab approach and you don't develop your ear, well, then you're really sunk because you'll never get the connection between
Yeah.
your ear and the fretboard. And that's why people are playing this. Well, how do I solo over chords and how do I make it sound good?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And there's all the clickbait out there that says, oh, roam the fretboard freely. Well, okay, you can roam the fretboard freely and play your wrong notes anywhere. you
Yeah.
know.
No,
So
but like that clickbait stuff that infuriates me because it's I sell courses as well, but I would never be like, oh, buy my course and double your speed in 20 days because there's no such thing. It's and
yeah,
even the people who sell those courses, even if they would be a good player, they know that that's not how it happened for them, and it's such snake oil stuff. And what happens for
yeah,
me is that I get students come to me and be like, oh, I did so and so's 21-day course and I did everything and I still suck. And then they think it's something wrong with them. And I think that's where I get pissed off because like you totally giving out the wrong idea. Because when I started, I read interviews with Ingwie and Paul Gilbert and all those guys, and everyone was like, "Yeah, we practice like 8 to 12 hours a day." So I was kind of brought up with like, "Yeah, this shit takes work," you know. There
right,
wasn't, and I think that
right.
hasn't changed. So
Marketing is what it is, and people want the cheap, easy fix. They want to get there faster. And, the only faster is to do it efficiently.
yep,
You have to know what the goal is, what's your vision, and what does it require. And then let's move sequentially toward that vision. But it
yep,
takes work, you
yeah,
know, it takes a lot of work. And I remember, a book that somebody had sent me years ago that was, play guitar, and I think it was 60 minutes, you know. And it's like, well, that's a great marketing hook. I'm sure you're going to sell some copies,
yeah,
but you know what? I can beat that. I can show you how to play the guitar in 1 second.
yeah,
Okay. You get your
exactly.
beginner and you pick that low E string, and just play quarter notes, and I'll improvise a song around you and you're
Yeah,
playing.
yeah.
It's like, well, you get what
But it's the whole
there's
thing, like the
shortcut in that sense.
6 minute abs and all that, TV,
Oh, sure. It's the
stuff.
same
Yeah,
thing.
yeah. But it's not good for people to see that. But and like you said, everyone is always going to be like, obviously, if you see one course, if like, oh, this one will get you to result, but you need to put in work to get there, and then you have another course next to it, like, no, 15 minutes a day for 21 days. Most people would go for the second one, even though I think they realize somewhere that this is probably not true. but they rather take the chance on that than actually have to be like, oh shit, this looks like work. So yeah, but also
here's the truth: you get out of it what you put into it, and there's no getting around it.
100%. And but so talking about that, so when you started out, you transcribed stuff, but did you have any kind of teacher or anything that taught you any of the technique principles, or is it everything you found yourself? Because you were quite early on with the when did you write Speed Mechanics? Was it 1990? It came out in 91, right?
I started it was published in 1990. I started writing it in 88, and
Yeah.
I wrote it through 89, and it was done. And then in 1990, I actually did the recording
Yeah.
in like January or something, and then the thing came out. It took them 6-8 months to get a book out, engraved,
But
and
did you have
all.
like a period there where you like really went all in on the technique stuff for a while? Because
Oh
I
yeah,
think
that was the period where I was digging deep. That's when I was doing all the 24 caprices, well, half of them anyway.
yeah.
Uh, I really just went for the ones that kind of lent themselves to the vibe that I could really
Yeah.
connect with. So I was all in on that, and I was working with people I was at the Wisconsin Conservatory Music teaching at that
Oh yeah.
point, working with a couple of really high quality players that were
I
trying.
remember that actually in the book you wrote like thank you to my students and you named some people there. That's cool. Yeah.
Yeah, we and that helped me kind of I mean, I had my own experience of what I was doing, but then taking that and working with them and then seeing what worked and how, and then kind of working process out. Now, of course, Speed Mechanics for Lead Guitar is a process book, but it didn't explain the process. The process was applied. You'd
Yeah.
have to read between the lines and see the process and say, oh, I can, now. And I did point out a few different practice approaches, so I guess in a sense that's process. But
I do remember having that, like starting with the single string stuff, and you had to get it up to a certain tempo before you moved on to the next thing, which I never did. Obviously, I just went to the next thing anyway. But I was thinking about that. Was that something you actually did yourself? And do you find that's effective, or do you find, because I find that I still work on single string technique, right? Because that's such a fundamental thing for, I think the better my single string technique is, the better my 3-note per string scales are as well, because you
sure.
spend more time on a single string anyway, unless you're doing like alternate picked arpeggios. But did you find that is that an approach that you kind of went through yourself, or like you stayed on a single string and then went to two strings, or is that more like
Well,
a didactic approach for other people? Because the tempo
so
wasn't anything crazy, really. It was 126 or something, right?
I think
Or 132.
132 is
Yeah, 132. Yeah.
is what I said. Don't move on if you can't do this at 132.
Yeah.
So basically, as I was coming up, I of course was just trying to copy the speeds of Van Halen and Randy Rhoads and so forth.
Yeah.
Now in retrospect, that stuff really wasn't fast by today's standards. I mean, it's
No,
fast.
but I mean, but you have to be in the context of the time you're in, right? Otherwise, yeah.
So that got me to a certain level, and then Speed Mechanics at that point, that's late 80s. So now Technique is and Ingwie, his speeds are higher and higher, and so I'm
But,
like,
but
okay,
still saying that, the only thing I can say, like, yes, you had like Paul Gilbert's video, Michael Badio had a video.
yeah.
I don't think Ingvei's video was even out yet, and then turned out to be like he didn't want to do that. You can tell when you watch it, and so there wasn't a lot of videos out there. Well, it wasn't. I mean, also videos, they weren't really. I love Paul Gilbert's first video, right? It's really cool to see him do it, but it's not teaching much. He's just showing something, and it doesn't talk.
Demonstrating,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. It's inspiring, but you don't really learn much in terms of like, all right, how do you actually practice this then? And that's what I found, like with your approach, even in like the metal lead guitar ones, where you had, oh, here's an exercise for the run in the solo practice this like this. That was like the groundbreaking thing for me, because I could see like, yeah, exactly. You can see how can I do it instead of like, here's the solo, have fun, guys, bye. That approach is not
Yeah,
very
so
helpful.
I'll say this about speed mechanics. The process was kind of like a backwards process, breaking
Hmm.
things down, because I always had understood, your traditional music approach is you start slow and you speed up. And
Yeah,
that works pretty well, but it really doesn't work for picking, because picking
no,
is more like riding a bike, where the faster you go, the more stable it becomes, and you slow down and things get wobbly.
yeah,
So, bottom up, like that's what I call bottom up approach, slow to fast. That works great for the left hand. It doesn't work great for the right hand. I mean, it works great up to a point, and
yeah,
then you run into a brick wall. And
exactly. That's what
the wall
everyone
that you run
says.
into is due to the fact that the mechanics have to change. So the whole point in speed mechanics of saying, hey, do this at least 132, and I'd say probably more like 140, is because if you jump over to a timed picking 16th notes at 140 on one string, you're basically using the fast motion. You're
Yeah,
using the small pick travel.
yeah,
Once you're doing that, well, then you can slow that down and hold on to it, and you can speed up the bottom up approach, and you can sort of meet in the middle. You can also at 140 continue to refine it and turn it into a little bit more of a muscle reflex and speed it on up, but it doesn't really change that much.
yeah,
On the other hand, what I did and what most people did was a very inefficient way of practice. And that's, 10 hours a day, hitting it, trying to speed it up, and just sort of forcing my way a little faster and a little faster and a little
hmm,
faster. That's what I did up to the point of finally getting the clarity and articulation. It was that, and it was learning a whole lot of music, because when you learn 12 of the 24 caprices or whatever it is I learned,
yeah,
and you memorize, you figure out different, oh, I could play it like this or this, which is best, on figure it out, memorize it, get it fast. You've spent so many hundreds and hundreds of hours doing that
yeah,
you've got good synchronization,
yeah,
and you've got some speed. Well, it's not the fastest way to get there. Speed mechanics is a faster way to get there, that I
yeah.
figured out in retrospect and working with other people.
And that's a good point, actually, because again, I've had a lot of students, and some of them who were really serious. I remember one in particular. He was like, "Oh, I want to learn exactly how you did it. Everything you did from day one to till now. That's how I want to do it." And I
Mm.
told him, like, well, even if I would remember how I did all that stuff, why would I take you through like, yeah, I'm gonna do this now, and then in 6 months we're gonna realize that this is a bad way, and we're gonna redo it. No, you want to get, like, exactly, you want to get the speed mechanics way. You
You
want
know,
to get the refined version instead of doing the stupid
yeah,
stuff.
instead of reinventing the wheel, starting from
Yeah,
scratch, no, benefit from the realizations that we've come to and the
yeah,
efficiencies that we've gained, and then you don't have to go through all the potholes on the way to get.
exactly. So one thing that I still remember this page, like, I don't know how you remember things, but looking at that page and seeing that uh, uh, white line, black line, white line, black line, and showing like uh, the transition time, and that was kind of like a flippant thing when you talked about it a little bit, but that concept, that, yeah, I tell all my students, like, this is what I got this early, and because I read your book, so I tried that, and I could really tell that it worked. But then when I went to GIT in the mid '90s, and another teacher there, David Oakes, a classical teacher, he showed the exact same concept, but he called it something else. But I recognize, I still call it transition time from your book, uh, and
Yeah.
that's such a game changer for building synchronization, and it's so important. But where did you get that concept? Did you find it somewhere, or did you just happen upon it? Because I've seen other classical musicians talk about similar things as well.
No, I pretty much everything that's in there, frankly, inside and outside picking, which I've heard later, Paul Gilbert had mentioned some things, but everything that was in there was really just my own analysis of what
Hmm.
is happening. and those are the terms I made up.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah,
it's
but
kind of
even with inside outside picking, I think you went deeper because you showed like the the five basic picking mechanics, which is, yeah, even if you would have gotten inside outside picking from somewhere else, you still took it, and I'm not saying you did, but you still took it way further than just that.
yeah.
So
Yeah, you know what? In fact, sometimes this happens, and as I've heard from an engineer friend of mine who does a lot of patents, people will come up independently with the same idea,
yeah,
and that's not that uncommon.
no,
But yeah, like transition time was just something that I looked at, and I think the perspective, like you said, you caught the perspective of it, and that informed how you thought of things, which changed your trajectory
yeah,
as a musician. It's important to get some of these things because that changes your perspective from playing notes to seeing it as motions,
yeah,
because mechanically we're doing motions, the notes don't matter, and that's one of
yeah,
the problems that again becomes a barrier for intermediate players. They plateau because it's like they have one approach, they're playing the notes, and I'm trying to play the notes faster, and I'm playing, it doesn't
yeah,
sound good, and it's because they haven't dug to the level to say, well, you know what, that's what I call the head-on approach, which is,
yeah,
hey, here's a lick, learn the lick, now play the lick, practice the lick. Well, the problem is that you have to repeat that lick. You would have to do it 1,000 times to build it to the level where you get mastery of the motions that lick uses.
yeah,
And that head-on approach works to a degree, but what'll happen is you'll get better and then it'll level out and you stop improving on it. You need
yeah,
a different lick that hits the same mechanics, and a different one and a different one. That's how you'll build the skill set. Or what I did in speed mechanics is I took a lick and pulled all the components of the
hmm,
motion apart, worked on each one independently. You get mastery of them independently. It's much easier to do. Then you can integrate them and put them back together.
yeah, and that's the Flight of the Bumblebee example, right? Which that fingering that you do for the main theme when you showed it in the art of practicing section of the book, that's
Yes.
still like it's such a workout for the third and fourth finger. That's
Oh
still,
yeah.
that's a tricky one, but it's really good. But I find that approach really fascinating to really see it looked at in that detail. So is that something you got from studying the classical pieces and solos in general? Is that something you used yourself there, or is it more something you've seen like, this is a good approach to do it, or was it something you actually had to use when you did the caprices as well, like breaking it down in this regard? uh,
Um, to some degree,
yeah,
well, my approach with something like the caprices, I mean, I mean, there's two separate things going on in any time you're learning a piece of music. There's the memorization of the piece,
yeah,
which has a muscle memory in and of itself.
yeah,
And one of the things people don't understand is that muscle memory is also tempo constrained. Like it's
yeah,
a different muscle memory to do it at different tempos. But within reason. So there's the learning of the thing, and then there is sort of the general skill set. So
yeah,
if you can play improvised contours through a diatonic scale at 140 beats per minute with alternating picking, crossing strings however you choose to cross and at a
yeah,
moment's notice. Well, that's kind of like a level of your ability. Well, that means that now when I go to play a caprice and it's got this cross string picking, well, basically I'll be able to do it at 140 as soon as I learn where my finger,
yeah,
what the
yes, yeah, exactly. It's a mechanics versus memorization approach. Yeah,
right.
uh,
But a lot of people early in the process of learning don't understand the base level. That's what we really want to develop as musicians.
yeah,
And they're still thinking in terms of this lick and this lick and that lick, and they're thinking of notes.
yeah,
So that's kind of a change of our perspective to see the whole thing. So to answer the question is when I would be looking at a caprice or something, I'd be looking at it thinking, um, where does the line break? Like oh, this part's easy, and then inevitably there's always it's a bottleneck issue. Like
Yeah,
in any complex system, you have bottlenecks. You'll have one point where an aspect of your technique, in this case, is reaching its maximum, even though the other parts are not.
yeah,
And what a lot of players do is because they don't make this all goes back to our conversation about time. If they don't understand that how important time is, because they never learned time, it's just something they feel, so it's abstract. They have been practicing with elastic time their whole life, and
yeah,
so they don't even know what the bottleneck is
yeah,
because they insert extra time, it screws the line up,
yeah,
it doesn't
yeah,
sound good,
for sure,
but
for
they don't
sure.
even know it, so they
Yeah,
can't fix. But if you do know it and you're playing along, you notice, oh, that part feels uncomfortable. And there are different levels of
yeah,
screw up. Okay. The subtle screw up is one that the listener wouldn't even know. But the subtle screw up is I tense up because it's hard and I'm not sure if I'm going to get it.
yeah, yeah.
So
You're gonna
that's
feel it
one level.
yourself way before anyone gonna hear it. You're gonna feel it if this feels off compared
Right.
to, for sure.
And if it feels off, that's my cue to say, what's wrong with that? Why is that hard for me? Then I analyze it. Then I'll come up with, a line. So like this line, um, I did a song that in Speed Mechanics for Drums with this drummer that I was working
Mhm.
with. It's a 5 minute like shred extravaganza thing, and it's like it's 170 beats per minute, and it's blazing fast the whole time
Yeah,
because what happened was I didn't set out. I generally don't write stuff like that, you
yeah,
know. I mean, I don't set out to write that. What happened was the drummer came up with a 5 minute drum workout, the speed metal stuff, and he composed the whole thing and he sent it to me, and then I wrote music on top of that.
yeah. Then you're kind of
So
stuck. You need to. You can't just play power chords the whole time.
yeah, so I then, as I was doing it, um, I had a few elements of technique that were bothering me. Like,
Hmm.
oh no, I mean I can do them, but at 170 beats per minute, some are harder than others. Some are less certain than others.
Yeah,
And I was like, you know what? I want these uncertain moments to be just as easy and automatic as the certain moments, so that I
yeah.
can just relax and play. So I wrote the song to make myself do those mechanics that I
Mm,
was shakier at. And by the time I wrote the song, played the song, recorded the song, they weren't problems anymore. And
that's
that's the
awesome.
magic formula,
Yeah.
you know, make
But when you practice, like, did you use? I mean, I tend to use a timer a lot of the time, and or just have an exercise that you basically do all over the neck or whatever it might be. But did you have any practice routines like that, or was it more like different thing every day when you practice the most when it comes to the
yeah,
technique stuff?
I'm not that disciplined or organized. I say like I can organize.
That's
Um,
funny because your books are so organized. You'll think
yeah,
that you'd be like,
so I've come to realize that structured thinking is not easy to do. It takes a lot of work.
yeah,
And my idea is that that's what a book should be,
hmm,
is the best structured thinking. I can do it. But like I said, it's hard work.
yeah,
Writing music is easy. Writing
yeah,
music is, freedom. But, that, like I said, that's just not, I had to put the music in the book. So I had to write the book. So
yeah.
anyway, um, Uh, I lost my train of thought there. What question did
Oh
you
no!
just
So
ask?
if you ever had like any type of routine, like oh,
Oh,
I did
routine.
this picking routine, or
Yeah.
was it more like every day you did a different
No.
thing?
So I have a more free ranging view of it. I
Hmm.
come from the point of view of I want to be inspired and I want to do the things that's inspiring me.
Yeah,
And sometimes that means that I might kind of piddle away some time or go down a rabbit hole. But I think that there's some value in that too. This is different for different people.
yeah,
If you're super scattered, you know, if you got ADHD or something, you're going to
Hmm.
need some tools to keep you on track.
Yeah.
And there's a whole spectrum, but there's no perfect answer. You know, if you're too scattered, you want to get less scattered. You know, if
Yeah.
you're too regimented, I think that's a problem too. You need more
Hmm.
creativity. You need to
Yeah.
allow yourself to roam.
Yeah.
So I've always kind of been somewhere in the middle, not too disciplined about it, but at the same time, inspired by the vision of perfect, easy execution.
Yeah.
I want to be able to do anything I want to do in my sleep without
Yeah.
any struggle. And until I get to that point, I don't feel like I've got it.
Yeah.
So, you know, if it's music I'm working on, or if it's kind of like putting together a book, I'll be like, okay, I could do this, and that would create the structure, and then I'll go back to it later, and I'll be like, you know what? That feels like those examples are too leaning this way. I need some antidote. I need some more contrast to hold interest. And then at some point, there's kind of an artistic balance in a
Yeah.
book presentation that I feel like, you know what? I freaking nailed it. It's perfect for my expression of what I'm trying to show and how I'm showing it.
Yeah.
And when I practice, I guess I just let the flaws or lack of what's perfect kind of be my that's what's on the table to
Yeah.
be fixed. And I'll go by, whatever it takes to do that. Now, sometimes that might be I mean, at times to drill a mechanic, I might have sat down and watched a program for a half an hour just doing a picking motion until it feels comfortable, you
That,
know.
that's
I
that you that's such a classic thing, and I'm happy you said that because heard interviews with Paul Gilbert, Key Marcello, if you remember him from Europe. Even Itzhak Perlman talked about he would practice in front of cricket games because they were so long, and it would take the volume down. And he said it's in like a documentary from the 70s. It's on YouTube, and it would be
yeah,
he said like, well, I'm only practicing mechanics, right? I'm not he's not practicing phrasing, right? But he said that's really good because then you can get a lot of work in without getting so bored. So I do think there's something to that because some people are very much like, no, you have to sit there with like it has to be exactly this amount of time, and you're not allowed to think about anything else. And if it's not super focused and deliberate practice, it's worthless. I don't believe that either, and it seems to be like there's so many people now. You another one that talks about the same thing that you know obviously
well,
you wouldn't do this for learning anything, but for
so
just getting
this kind of goes back to the a little knowledge is a dangerous thing.
yeah,
Like, yes, we want focused practice, but the question is, what are you focused on? So,
yeah,
for example, if you focus on doing the same thing over and over, what you're doing is you're building that process from conscious and it goes into subconscious.
yeah,
And if you myelinate the nerves, and that's
yeah,
the, the the terms of what's actually physically
yeah,
happening. But psychologically, what's happening is it's moving into the subconscious. So, what people don't understand, they hear, oh, I'm supposed to keep my focus on this exercise. And they don't realize that that's only for a span of time, and it gives you a consequence, and then you're at a different point and you need to practice a different element. You need to practice improvisation. You need to practice the part of your brain to create as you play. That's a
yeah,
completely different type of practice. And when it comes to physical motion, getting the mechanics into the subconscious, what you don't want to do is beat the example to death so that your brain numbs out,
yeah,
because that's what will happen. So how do you keep your brain active? Well, there are several ways. One way is you watch a program and
yeah,
you don't pay attention to it. You do the mechanics. Well, that's effective for what it does.
yeah,
Another thing that you could do that I'm really fond of is you learn how to improvise variations of a phrase
yeah,
as you play, and all the variations maintain the same motion. So,
Yeah.
for example, people get stuck on the notes. Exercise 25 in speed mechanics for lead guitar. It's that old. It's come down the harmonic minor scale, and
Mhm.
it's
With open
synchronized.
string. Yeah.
Yeah, and we're doing a couple things. You're picking fast on one string at a time. You are synchronizing them in sets of four, both with the pick and the left hand. So they're
Hmm.
synchronizing with pulse. So it does a few things, and people will play that exercise, and play it to death. And the truth of the matter is, well, once you can do that, why don't you try a different contour of the scale? Or why don't you try the E major scale? Because you get tired of harmonic minor after a
Yeah.
while. If you haven't gotten tired of it, you haven't practiced enough.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. For
you
sure.
change the scale, do a different variation, and all of a sudden, a whole world, you can be busy for a half hour and your brain will not get tired 1 second, even though you're doing the same thing over and over.
Yeah.
But that has to come at the right time. If you try
Yeah.
to do that too early in the process, you'll just screw yourself up and you won't be able to do it.
No, because then you don't know that you're making a variation because you don't know what the actual thing is to begin with, right? You have to
Well,
have that
exactly.
first.
You have to have a structure before you can create variations, and this
Yeah.
is one of the things that people, as they try to improvise and say, "Whoa, why can't I improvise? Everything just sounds like noodling garbage."
Yeah.
Well, it sounds like noodling garbage because there's no structure.
Yeah.
You have to use structure to create a musical statement, and then you can create another musical statement, and then you're going somewhere.
Yeah.
So anyway, all of those things are tools that we can use in the process, but we have to use them at the right time. And if you try to use the right tool at the wrong time, it's not going to help you.
Yeah.
Not much.
But I also think when it comes to like the approach they have to practice, I think since you've been doing your books, I'm guessing that was you made a living doing that. So you didn't have a real job, so to speak. I mean, there's a real of a job as any to be a music teacher, and because that's what I've been doing my whole life, pretty much. But
Yeah.
in terms of like you didn't have to go to an office, so you had more free time than maybe
Well,
most people working in an office. And I think when I've listened to, I heard Ingwie talk about like he never really practiced. He said he played a lot, and I don't think I can't see him sitting with a metronome and doing anything focused. I
yeah.
really believe him when he says that.
Well,
And same
yeah.
thing with
I'll
Guthrie
accept
Goblin as well. Like they just played, but they played so much every day. And I think the more time you have, the less focus you can get away with, and still get if you
I
practice correctly.
separate. I separate into maintenance versus breaking new ground. So
Hmm.
Ingve is not interested in breaking any new ground. He
Yeah,
could. There are elements of technique. He'll revert to certain patterns, certain picking things, and it's enough for
yeah,
him. Now, it's not enough for me because if it was if I listened to him and I was to say, you know what, everything he plays is awesome, it's fascinating to me, and I don't get tired of it, well then it's enough. And apparently it's enough for him. And there's nothing wrong with that. If
yeah,
you find your artistic center and your technique allows for that, well, that's the whole goal, right?
yeah,
Once you're expressing everything you want to express, that's it.
yeah,
So he's doing that. He could break new ground. There are techniques that he could learn and do that he's not great at. And with a little effort, he could be, but he doesn't need to. That's a self imposed
yeah,
decision. So, you know, um, but maintenance and breaking new ground, you do maintenance, you're going to sink what you already know deeper into muscle memory. All you have to do is play.
yeah,
Now, same is true for an intermediate player. He can just go and play in his cover band and play what he does, and he's not going to break new. He's never going to become a better player. He's going to be stuck where he is, but he's going to get good, and he will master what he's doing. So we all need a level of maintenance so that we don't erode our skills. And if you want to continue to improve, you need to break new ground. These are different um, systems.
yeah,
So just because Guthrie Govan, all he needs to do is maintenance, that doesn't necessarily relate to, what you or I or anyone else should or shouldn't be doing.
no,
But we have to understand that there's a role for maintenance and there's a role for breaking new ground, and the choice is ours of how much of either one of those things we want to do.
Yeah, for sure. I do think though this whole when you read different practice routines of famous players, you have Steve Vai was this like super disciplined and everything was 1 hour this and 1 hour that, and then you have Ingwie who's like just played a lot, and you have Guthrie kind of played a lot as well. I think Alan Holdsworth was more like he could play. I think in one interview, I maybe didn't even pick up the guitar that day, and other days he couldn't put it down. So it seems to be like uh, the difference there is that they have so much time. That's because that's all they did. So they could spend all day if they wanted to, because they didn't have the, other obligations. And I find like,
Yeah. Oh, I would like to address that because
yeah,
that changes through time too. So when
hmm
I was a teenager, I was playing quite a bit, and then I got in bands, and then when I was 18, I ended up deciding, okay, I'm not going to go to college. I'm going to take a year off, and I'm going to see where the band goes. Where the band went was didn't really go anywhere, so I ended up
yeah,
teaching. Well, I was doing okay at that. Let's do it. Let's do another year. It was just, let's see where this goes. And then the opportunity to write these books came. Well, in that period, I was doing a lot of 8, 10 hour days. I would
yeah,
rehearse with the band 3 hours at night or play, a couple hours set. I would practice the bulk of the day,
hmm
on and off. So I went through plenty of those long practice sessions for this period of several years. And then as things went, I was teaching. Well, teaching has a guitar in your hand, but it's not exactly practice.
no,
You know,
for sure.
it does it's better than not, I guess. But so I was teaching, like halftime, and I was in a band and I was writing music and recording music. That's also a part-time thing, kind of straddle. And then I'd be doing recordings, but the recordings again with these books were often relatively small segments of time.
Yeah,
So, but I was playing quite a bit and practicing until in the early 90s, that kind of started to go away. I stopped playing because at that point I was all maintenance. In other
yeah,
words, I wasn't breaking new ground because I was already able to play anything I wanted at any speed.
yeah.
So now the question is, let's just play music. Well, unfortunately, there weren't that many opportunities to play music. I wasn't in a regular playing situation through the 90s.
But
And
also guitar through the 90s were kind of abysmal in terms of like I like a lot of the bands that came out then now, but starting out in 92 was not very inspiring, like buying a Guitar World and
not,
every
yeah,
other issue was shitting on Steve Vai and Shred is Dead and all this stuff. So that's why I think like having resources like your books, you know, older like Vinnie Moore things, and like then finding Dream Theater and things like that, that really helped push through that era, because it was kind of
yeah,
kind of gloomy to be a good guitar player. I don't know. Do you know the band Steel Panther?
yeah.
Yeah. So the guitar player there, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
He was a teacher at GIT
Oh,
before I got there. Yeah. And he had a seminar when I was there in '95, and I've heard of him like, oh, he's really good. And it was the most depressing thing I've seen. It was like early,
didn't
like
take much.
no, it was like came out in like black jeans and like, yeah, hey guys, what's up? Yeah, I'm probably gonna do my laundry soon when I get back. It felt like all the air had gone out of these guys, because they built their technique up and they built the playing ability up, and then all of a sudden it's like no one wants to hear this. You suck. You're a nerd now, and
Yeah,
so there was
there's
quite a weird time.
yeah, for those of us who are inherently craftsmen
Yeah,
that like to improve and continue to grow our capacities, which, that's me, then when we take that and we go into the world in terms of commoditization and earning money and having a career,
yeah,
well, you got to understand that the craftsman is on this side of the equation,
yeah,
and the other side of the equation is just people listening to music, and they like what they like.
yeah,
And
for sure.
and music has a social function. That's what it really is. Um, and so all of a sudden, I mean, I used to have this idea too, and it was one of the biggest perspective errors of my career was I had this fundamental assumption that, and I guess growing up in the 80s and whatever facilitated this, but the
Hmm.
idea was, if I just get good enough with my skills, the right opportunity will come along.
Yeah.
And that's not true. You know,
No.
it takes some luck, and the right things have to hit at the right time to do this. And there are people on the other side of the equation that have a career success and are very unhappy with their artistic limitations.
Yeah.
You know? When I met Tremonti, that was the situation for him. He was like, no, no, I really want to do this, and I can't bridge this gap,
Yeah.
between what he was doing and what he wanted to do. Now, he did successfully bridge that gap, and
Yeah.
I helped him do that. But, you know, um, this 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 is a real different issue when you suddenly realize that, well, skill is ultimately in service of music. And the
Yeah.
music may or may not require that much skill. And then the guys get kind of jaded. So we go through these phases again, like where a band will be real creative for a while. And then all of a sudden, guess what? They start just rehashing the same ideas over and over and over and over because they stop
Yeah.
growing, because it became a job, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah, for sure. But you see that with a lot of bands. But I also think like the difference now though is that now guitar is as popular as it's ever been, I guess, because you're not reliant upon a few magazines telling you that this guy is good. You can go to their Instagram page, you can find people on YouTube. There's a complete, it's not even underground guitar anymore. Like you can, whoever you like, you can follow that. And I think that's the good thing about social media, because I remember, do you know who Brett Garsed is?
I
So
do not.
amazing player. He played with Nelson in the 80s, like the hair band.
Yeah, yeah.
And he said and then he's some fusion stuff. And he's an amazing player. Lives in Australia. He's from Australia from the beginning as well. But he said in an interview that he when grunge hit, right? They kind of did some other stuff, but he realized afterwards, like, hang on, a lot of these hair bands, for lack of a better term, they kept playing. They still had gigs. It wasn't like their
Yeah.
fans dropped them. It was just that the media didn't put the spotlight on them anymore.
Right.
So
Because they're not selling as big.
I think
All
that's,
about sales.
and also I think now with AI and all this stuff coming up, I think actually being good at a musical instrument, people are gonna like that. It's a real thing. I don't care if you can put in like a better guitar solo in using AI, because it's not real. That's like putting in like Chopin in MIDI and playing it faster than the original. Like who cares? It's not that human connection. So I do think like
Yeah,
playing an instrument is probably going to be even more valuable going forward.
yeah. Well, and what we're talking about really is how the music industry changed,
Yeah,
as it shifted. And I'm still quite split on that because, like who said it? We were moving in the '90s. This was a producer, I guess, and I can't remember who said this, but he said we're going to go from 100 bands making $1 million each to 1 million bands making $100 each. Of course, he is absolutely right. But
yeah,
here's the great flaw and the problem is, yeah, anybody with an internet connection and a guitar now can put their stuff out there. That's true. And to get really good, you have to, unless you're independently wealthy,
yeah,
um, or somebody else is supporting you, you have to straddle, which means you're not going to be, you're going to be a part-time, you're now a hobbyist.
yeah,
So you've got a lot of hobbyists. So there's a lot of, um, it's, let's put it this way. It's very difficult now to actually perfect your skill set and be that craftsman that is really that good. And furthermore, you're probably, if you do that, you're pretty much above the heads of anybody anyway,
yeah,
and people will or will not get it. So now you have to market yourself, which then just becomes another gatekeeper. In other words, the gatekeepers used to be the record companies. Now the gatekeeper is Google. If
Yeah.
you want to, you have to figure, okay, the algorithm and get all this shit out there. And then you got, or have a lot of money and advertise,
Yeah.
and get your million views out there. So the gatekeepers are still there and they're just different.
Yeah.
You know, I think that at the end of the day, the bottom line is, as an artist, what do you want to do? How good do you want to be at what you want to do? And what is your vision? What is your artistic vision? What is your creative um, effort going to look like in the world? And, and if you enjoy what you're doing and you enjoy that process, then you should do it, you know, and
100% agree.
what'll happen will be what'll happen, life will give you or not give you the opportunities. I kind of grew up in a time period when it was the idea, at least in the United States, I would summarize as, follow your dreams,
Yeah.
and you can make it happen. Well, guess what? That's bullshit. Yeah, you can follow your dreams, and it may or may not happen. Life will come at you and think you'll turn left or right sometimes in a way that you never anticipated.
Yeah.
And you know, yet the point though is that the journey can still be interesting and the journey can still be revealing. And maybe if we spend a little more time thinking in terms of not the outcome of the journey, but how does the journey change you on the inside? Well, it's going to change you.
Yeah.
And if that's what's important, then you can't fail. So,
Exactly. And also, I think if you try, especially like in more guitar oriented stuff, or like where it's more, it's actually skilled playing and all that stuff. I think if you go about that as like yeah, I'm gonna get rich doing this, then that you it's just a wrong. You're barking up the wrong tree to begin with. I think you have to do that for yourself, and then whatever happens, happens. Like you said. I mean, I heard that. I don't know if this is true, but I read something online that kind of caught me off guard years ago, where I heard that Alan Holdsworth I think he painted fences for a while. This might be completely bullshit, but he had to have some other income for a while. And I
sure.
was like, whether you like his playing or not, he's probably one of the best guitar players ever to ever do it. So it's kind of like that. That was a bit like you said. I always thought that as well. If you get good enough, things are just gonna, open up for you. But that's not really the case. It really isn't, because
No,
that's
there's no guarantees. And
no.
yeah, yeah, I
It's kind
think
of a
that
shame, because if you get good enough in the classical world, then but on the other hand, then
you're
you
right.
have way more competition there in a way, because it's like that's what people gunning for.
Well,
You're
because
competing with some.
the audience of that world values,
Yeah.
that kind of control and precision. Whereas if you're talking about popular music, what you're
Yeah.
really talking about is the social element. It's like, oh, that's a goth band, and that's a metal band, and that's a punk band, and each one has a sound and an attitude, and their function in society is to be a lightning rod for like-minded people.
Yeah.
And so, if you're that and you're a performer, that's probably way more important than being a musician,
Yeah.
because you're going to be appealing to people at the level of where their interest is. So no, I'm not saying that's right or wrong or good or bad. I'm just saying that's reality. So, if that's what you want to do, well, great, do that. You'll probably have a better outcome in terms of making a living.
Yeah.
You had mentioned, me doing like books and stuff as a career. Book writing was never a full-time career for me. It was always part, I would work on a book full time for a couple of months, but
Hmm.
there was other elements all the time. At one point, I took 9 months off in the 90s and I built a house
Oh,
because
wow.
I wanted to have a recording studio. And I I didn't have, contrary to popular belief, even though these books were successful, it was never more than a modest income.
Hmm.
So,
I mean,
uh,
okay, it's like the record industry where Leonard took all the money, or
yeah, well, partly, but partly it's different because in the record industry, you sell a million records. If a band sells a million records, they do that within a year,
yeah,
typically. And then they do another record, and they don't, maybe the first million, they don't really make money. Then they renegotiate and they make their money on the second record.
yeah,
Um, I sold a million books, but it took 30 years. You take
yeah,
that money and you spread it out over 30 years, and it's a modest income.
yeah.
So, you know,
Has it been
um,
like even like you get royalty checks every year? Is it every month, or has it been like fairly even the whole time, or has it been?
oh no,
Has it been
it's
something
been
you
up
can
and down.
rely on?
It's reliable in that the checks come, but it
Yeah.
it varies greatly. So, yeah, in the 90s, it went way down, and I had to do other things. In 2000, I finally got my recording studio built, and then I became a full-time producer. I produced
Oh,
regional bands for like 3 years and didn't do any books. Or if I did one, maybe it was just a sideline
yeah.
part-time thing. And then I started an online sheet music company with a business partner around 2000. And by 2004, it was making 4 times, 5 times as much money as I ever made from book writing,
Oh,
even
wow.
though retailing my, and that went for a while. And then market pressures changed that. That was my primary gig. And then during that time, I did put out Fretboard Mastery at that time. But again,
Yep.
that was sideline. So I'm not really playing much. During that time, that's when I got hooked up with Tremonti, and then I
Hmm.
started a band. Well, then I was no longer writing any books at all. I was managing this company and playing live, try
Yep.
and recording. Well, that ended up falling through because the industry changed, right? We got delay after delay after delay, and we finally got our ducks all in a row. And when we did, then the industry collapsed enough that we couldn't buy onto any tours, and it was dying its last breath, switching over to this new format,
Yeah.
uh, which doesn't really work for trying to launch bands, which that's another story.
Yeah.
Anyway, um, so I went through a period where I'm still getting some checks, but I'm not making much money at all. I'm living at the poverty level. I actually
Yeah.
qualified for assistance
Oh,
for
wow.
years, and now things. I've one of the sideline businesses of that came back. I also at the time became a partner in a microphone company with a patented product that kind of teetered along for a while. Good product, but it didn't succeed on the marketing side. I'm not good at that, apparently. So I've gone through all kinds of stuff, straddled multiple careers, and I have multiple businesses. And playing guitar is kind of a centerpiece of it all.
Yeah.
But
But, but
it's
when
not
when you
in my
wrote
full-time income.
when you wrote the books, though, did you get because you wrote quite a few books in a row, so to speak, or like you did? So the very first book was that the metal lead guitar, or was that like the rhythm
The
guitar
first
book?
book published was Heavy Metal Rhythm Guitar 1 and 2. They came out in 85, 85 and
Yeah,
86. Then the lead guitar books came out in 86 and 87.
yeah.
And then Guitar Tricks came out in 88, and Speed Mechanics came out in 90.
Because that's
So that was
quite,
the first
an
thing.
even spread like that. Did you get some advance so you could actually work on the book, like some money to
Um,
live on, or were they a bit like, yeah, we'll see how this goes? I mean, after you released like 4 books, they must have seen that. Okay, number one, this guy clearly knows what he's doing, and also, I mean, like I said, your books always had stood out to me because I checked out any book I could check out, and there's no one's been close to the quality of like the teaching and the playing and the recording. Is a next level thing. So they must have known what they had as well. So they couldn't have been like, oh, what if he goes to
yeah.
another company?
Well, what they what I remember them saying at the time was, a really good product once it gets into the market, it, in their words, has legs. So it
Yeah.
just keeps selling itself without any
Hmm.
advertising or marketing. And I think my books have, because of that, they have proven that. I mean, they're still in print at 30
Yeah.
years, 35 years later, you know. Now those 80s uh, books were re-released in the 90s with modifications, but they're essentially the same books.
Hmm.
Um, so, I mean, yeah, they've done well. And then I tried doing different kinds of books, and later, they didn't catch on as well. Some of them have. Total Rock Guitar has done well, but now, of course, hard copy books don't sell much. I mean, for every one I sell, there's probably 20 of them that are downloaded illegally.
Yeah.
Um, you know, and so the only way to deal with that is, well, I don't do more books. What I do now is I do online subscription,
Yeah.
and I use the books that are out there, or then help bring people in, show people who know who I am, what I do. But yeah, the books are really, oh geez, I mean, it was nice to be able to do them, and I think the advance on a book is typically around $1,500. So I mean, what's that? That's 2 weeks
Even in
of,
the 80s, that must have been like, okay, so
yeah,
it's like,
I,
it's like,
I spend that, and
yeah, yeah, but that's like,
so
wow, okay,
it's a niche market, is the
yeah,
point. Even them being as successful as they were is still just, a modest income,
yeah,
and that's the point. I mean, I'm grateful that I had the opportunity to do it, and and they've done well. But a lot of people assume that because I've got a successful product line that's been out for a long time, I must be rich and famous. And
yeah.
maybe famous is true, but rich is not going along with it, unfortunately.
No, but that's very interesting to hear. So what I want to do before I let you go here, I'm taking way too much of your time, but I had some questions in so where we're filming this is inside my school community, right? Uh, called the practice room, but this is going to be up on YouTube, and I, I had some questions here from the members, if you
Oh,
don't
okay.
mind. So
Yeah,
let's
sure,
see,
let's hit it.
and we might have covered some here, but. Uh, Okay, and if you find any, I mean, there's no weird questions in that regard. But if it's something you feel like you don't understand, because I can't have them expand on it. So one says, let's see. Well, Shahar asks if there was a 2.0 version of Speed Mechanics, what topics would he add? And I actually replied to that and said, I think he already released that, and that's the new one, right? But not the one you're still working on, the art of picking, but that's not out yet, right? But the one you did,
It's total picking control. So the
yeah,
subtitle is expanded speed mechanics. So the reason it focuses more on picking is because picking is kind of the real final frontier of mastery. That's
yeah,
where nuance comes in, where it gets much more difficult. Um, so that is speed mechanics. In fact, I was calling it Speed Mechanics 2 as a working title,
I mean,
and
that's a great thing. I mean,
the
because
publisher
that's
didn't want to do it because their experience is, as soon as you put a 2 on it, it tells people that if they don't know 1, they have to go to 1 first, that it's a series.
okay, yeah,
And the truth of the matter is it's a standalone.
yeah.
It's a different approach. It's a more in-depth, exploded approach, and it's more applied to music, whereas the original is more exercise intensive.
Yeah. Well, it makes sense. I mean, Total Picking is a great name too. So I guess that, but also another thing might be that if someone is already familiar with speed mechanics, they're gonna see your name and recognize it anyway. So that maybe it's maybe they had the right thing there. Maybe they know what they're doing.
Maybe
Uh,
they do.
yeah. Then we have this one.
Oh,
I'm not quite sure what it means here. How to use sequence method in terms of speed developing any routine. I guess he wonders if you use sequences in when you developed your speed.
yeah,
Or
so sequencing, being technically speaking, being a regular contour
yeah,
repeated at different scale steps. Um, sequencing is something that you should know, and it's something that you should do. It's not a good way of developing speed. Because when you sequence a scale, if you pick all those notes in the sequence, you
Hmm.
are throwing all of the cross string mechanics together, and that's the worst way to develop your speed.
Yeah,
You
it's
know,
too much
um,
for you.
it's a good if you want to do bottom up approach and you want to get nice synchronization. But if you really want to play fast sequences, that's not the way to do it. Is It's not going to work. Um, so here's what the value of sequencing is, though, in my view. When we are talking about connecting your ear to the fretboard, your ear hears music in terms of scale steps. The fretboard does not show scale steps until you learn your scales.
Yeah,
And it's one thing to look at the fretboard and you see, okay, I'm going up a scale. So I go up this string. Well, it's easy on a string, low notes, high notes.
yeah.
It's like a piano, a piano.
Hmm.
The higher you go, the higher the note. The lower you go, that's easy. So if you did a sequence on a piano, it'd be real easy to see.
Hmm.
But on guitar, you've got a segment, and then you've got to jump back to the next string, and you have a segment, and then you have another segment and another segment. And that's easy too if all you're doing is going up a scale and down a scale. You go zip, zip,
Yeah,
zip, 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 zip. But when you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 5, 4,
yeah.
5, 6, 7, 8, 7, all of a sudden the patterns get very convoluted. And it's hard then and this is why the sequence is valuable, is because it teaches you the scale steps in a very direct and intuitive way so that you can translate between your ear and the scale. The guitar, as a chromatic instrument with multiple strings, is inherently difficult because of the nature of being a chromatic instrument.
Yeah,
There's a plus and a minus. The great plus is you can change keys just by sliding. Okay,
yeah,
fine. But the great minus is what we're talking about here is seeing in terms of scale steps. And the reason it's so important to do that is because your ear hears in terms of scale steps. So if
yeah.
you want to connect your ear to the scale, to the fretboard, you have to be able to sequence and understand where you are in terms of the steps,
Yeah.
because that's what dictates what things sound like.
So do you
So
think when it comes to ear, and this is my own question. So I've done I use movable do solfege. So the do re mi fa sol la ti, but it's if I'm in C major, that's do. If I'm in D, then D is do, and so on. But it's the same thing as the functional intervals. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It's just that you don't have to sing 7 or flat 7. You can just sing T or te or whatever. Is that something you've done? Not necessarily the solfege, but is that how you hear the music, or do you hear it more in absolute intervals? In like this ascending fifth, descending whole step, or would you hear that as more like 1, 5, 4 on the fretboard?
Well, how I hear? Well, I hear at multiple levels. So there's a general harmonic context, there's tonal center, and then there's the general chordal motion
Hmm.
in terms of root movement or not root movement if you use an inversion.
Yeah.
So you hear that, and then you hear the melodic aspect in terms of its scale steps. And when you understand how the chords relate with those scale steps, you start seeing melody as decoration.
Hmm.
And then you're starting to perceive multiple, important notes and less important notes. And this is one of the things beginner and intermediate players don't understand, that there are important notes and less important
Yeah.
notes. So they play a line and they're like, oh, this is the notes. And what eludes them with that perspective is how music works.
Yeah.
So they never really understand that. Um, and so I see everything in terms of those intervals, and I personally find it pretty easy to say, so if I hear a melody, I know what its scale steps are,
Yeah.
but I also know how those scale steps relate with chords, so I
Yeah.
know
But
what chords could go with them.
Yeah,
And
that's really important. But I remember you had a singing exercise in the speed mechanic, which was really good for me as well because I was all into to shred and all that stuff. But then you kind of show all this stuff, and then like all of a sudden, oh, now we're gonna sing scales, and like, huh? And then that sort of opened up a thing for me, with like getting into sight singing and stuff like that. So I think it's a very versatile book. It's not just about speed and whatever. It's really about music and how to learn it properly. So
yeah,
that's really
in
cool.
fact, the title of that book was another publisher related thing because
Yeah,
they knew that, of course, what's going to sell? Well,
yeah,
speed. Everybody wants to play fast,
yeah.
and I can't disagree with them. But I actually wrote the book as more of, okay, the part one is the mechanics. Part two is the importance of rhythm. Part
Hmm.
three is the creative aspect and connecting your ear. And so I gave the at least the beginning stages of the whole picture of what it was going to take to
Yeah.
develop musicianship, even though the title is really focused on that first breakdown approach
Do you
of
remember what did you have another title in mind that you remember, or was it just you knew that?
I don't think I did know what title would encompass the whole thing,
Yeah.
or if I did have in mind a working title. I had in mind a an approach to breaking down the elements of mastery of the guitar so you could do whatever you wanted. I mean,
I mean,
that's
if you
all it
call it
was.
like Guitar Master, that would have been great. But I also think they were right again, because I remember seeing that in like where I ordered music, videos and whatever, like speed mechanics. Yep, all Troy Stetina. Yep, I'm gonna get that. So they probably were right. But it's kind of funny because Frank Gambale said he had the same problem when he published uh, speed picking, this first speed picking book. He called it sweep picking already, but the publisher was like, no one knows what the hell sweep picking is. It doesn't mean
Right,
anything. Like they want
right.
speed. And he was like, no, but it's ridiculous. And then like, oh, go with that then. So that it's kind of like, but again, leave the guitar stuff to the guitarists and the publishing stuff to the publishers. But it's kind of funny.
Yeah, that's
All right,
true.
I'm gonna. There's a lot of questions here, but I'm just gonna end on one question here. We can't. I want to keep you the whole day. We've also covered some of the stuff here already. Uh, all right. So Peter asks how to stop unwanted tension, especially in the picking hand. Is there anything you've found that works well with, and not necessarily with yourself, but with if there's any student you've had that had like issues with really tense
Yeah,
picking?
that is the $1,000,000 question. That is the thing that obscures progress.
Yeah.
Um, that's exactly I have an art of picking master class that's every month,
Mhm.
and that's the kind of stuff that we go into. And here's why it's so hard to answer that question. There are principles, yes, and how a particular player interacts with those principles is what we need to understand.
Yeah.
It might be an angle issue. It
Yeah.
might be a pick travel issue. It could be any number of things. And if you don't properly relate where you are to the overall principle, it's not going to help you.
Yeah.
It's like the principle can be valid, and if where the rubber meets the road, you don't engage the principle properly, you're not going to get there. So I can explain the principle of saying, yeah, well, we jump over the chasm of this intermediate range. You go to the fast picking speeds. That's where you get your pick travel, and therefore you play on the one string enough until it starts to relax your grip. Well, there's some angle issues. There's how do you relax your grip when if you relax your grip, the pick moves or you
Yeah.
drop the pick.
Yeah.
Well, these are all things that are handled in a very unique case by case situation,
Yeah.
depending on exactly what the problem is. And furthermore, different people, I mean, we're all similar, but we all have slight differences
Mm.
in the mechanics of how what works,
Yeah, for
and
sure.
that's one of the reasons why in speed mechanics I didn't go into that kind of stuff because I saw different people picking with different technique. And I'm
Hmm.
not going to say this guy's right and this guy's wrong, or say I'm doing it right and everybody who's doing it different than me
Yeah.
is wrong, because if it works, it works. The problem with that approach, though, is that this guy's asking because it's not working for
Yeah.
him. And so how do we make it work for him? And the only real answer is to take a direct look and bring all of the principles and all of the details of experience to say, okay, let's try this, let's try this. Oh, that's better. Do that until it becomes muscle memory. Now you can relax the grip. I mean,
Yeah.
typically you've got to be on the tip of the pick, first of all. You can't be digging in too much, because the harder you dig in, the harder you have to hold the pick to avoid it. But
Yeah.
the irony is that over time, once you master the ability to play on the tip of the pick with precision and consistency of motion so that it doesn't catch, now you can relax and still have control over it. And, like the Troy Grady stuff, I know that one of the things I've heard people talk about there is
The
he's
other
saying,
Troy.
yes, yeah, yeah. So, and that's a whole nother, well, I mean, where I agree and what I disagree about
Yeah.
is another whole. Uh, we could talk about that for an hour easily.
Yeah. No, I'm
But
the same. But yeah. Yeah. Go ahead.
yeah, but I'll just put it out there that I feel that he made a great impact by defining in a more detailed way a lot of elements. Now, what we do with them and what they mean and how we implement them, the process, we can have different ideas of
Yeah.
that to get to different goals. But in any case, you know, as you're if you're looking at an advanced player who's mastered a thing, whether it's
Yeah.
Ingwie or it's maybe my own picking, because I
Yep.
can play out as fast as anybody want to hear. So as you're looking at that, you can see what's going on, and in some cases, I will pick very deep into the strings. I'll hit the strings hard, and at that moment, I might have a tight grip too. But the key is I can relax
Yeah.
and I can play on the tip of the pick with consistency. If you can't do that, you're never going to play without tension.
Yeah.
We can add tension when we intend to add tension,
Yeah,
but
but I think that's actually a good point, because I got on this question from a lot of students where they're like, "Oh, what about pick depth?" And I said, "This not I don't ever think about that, because I listen to what I'm doing. So
right,
yes, if like you said, if you play harder, you need to dig in more, and then you're gonna get a deeper pick depth. But I don't care whether that is 3 millimeters or what. That's not the way that I approach it. I think it's better to approach it from like, does it feel good and what does it sound like, and then all the details sort of take care of themselves from that.
right,
Because I think it's easy as well to get stuck in like the weeds of like, and that's kind of
yeah,
where I'm with the
I
Troy
agree
Grady
with
stuff.
you.
Yeah.
I
So.
agree with you. I would just say that in the breakdown approach of pulling everything apart, one of the things that I would encourage somebody who has too much tension, which is pretty much everybody at first,
Hmm.
is let's get control of pick depth so that you can relax,
Yeah.
so that you can play consistently, and that the pick grip and the string won't be dictating the time the string sounds, but you will be dictating the time the string sounds,
Yeah.
so that your rhythmic flow can be good. And once you have that, then you don't have to pay any attention and you can let pick depth take care of itself, just
Yeah.
because it's the sound you want to hear.
Exactly. But you approach it from the sound perspective. But I think Sharon Isbin, the classical guitar player, she said in I think it was her book, where she talked about when she was learning any kind of a piece, she would learn it without dynamics first, like just memorizing it, right? And do it at a very soft, like, piano uh,
Mhm.
dynamic level, because she didn't want to introduce any excess tension anywhere. And then
That's an
once,
important
yeah.
point. I want to say something about that,
Mhm.
because this people want simple answers to say, should I play with a metronome or not? It's like, well,
Yeah.
yes, sometimes you should, sometimes you shouldn't. It depends.
Exactly. Yeah.
And should I use dynamics? Okay, if you have the control to be able to play a dynamic list consistent, then you actually have control of dynamics. Then you can play loud, then you can play soft.
Yeah.
If you can't hold steady, you have no business trying to do dynamics. So I would say, yeah, I actually agree with that. It would be nice to be able to play completely evenly and have the control to do that.
Yeah.
Then another step would be to play very, very lightly, very softly. Can you do that? And if you can do that, now you can play with the full range of dynamics because it's easy to tighten up.
Yeah.
You know, it's easy to get loud. It's getting quiet and being consistent at low velocity that's difficult.
Yeah, and I think that her point was like she was, because if you're a classical musician, I mean, I can't think of anything more, harrowing live experience wise than having to be like, oh yeah, we're gonna go up and play just a nylon string classical guitar performance for 90 minutes, and if you start tensing up 10 minutes in, you're cooked. It's
Yeah,
over, right? So I think
yeah,
for her was more like making absolute sure she did not get any kind of weird habits as she was learning the music, and then she could like work on the interpretation when she had it. So I think, yeah, so I think there's a lot to this, but I do believe, like we talked about in the beginning, where you go with what the sound that you're going for. What's the sound that you want, and that's how you change your technique when you play as well. And that comes from learning by ear. I'm 100% sure, because then like you play a power chord, and it's like, oh, that doesn't sound right, and then, oh, I need to be a bit further back, and then, oh, I need to mute it here, oh, I need to slide into this note, I need to bend, and I think it's a hard road to develop that without doing it the hard way, so to speak, by
yeah.
listening.
And part of the reason that that's so critical on guitar is the guitar is very responsive to the nuance of touch,
Yeah,
and
for sure.
how hard you press the note, how a little waver or slide, or all the different articulations, obviously the hammer pull stuff and bar. I mean, there are so many things that'll affect the sound,
Yeah.
that if you don't connect your ear intimately to what you're doing, you're never going to be an interesting guitar player.
No,
So
for
it's
sure.
absolutely critical that, for an intermediate player, when they're stuck, I mean, connecting the ear is really fundamental, and that's what's going to get you unstuck. If you're
Yeah.
stuck, you're probably not well connected.
No. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking the time. We went quite a long time, and I really appreciate that. And also, I mean, there's so much more stuff that we could talk about, but I don't want to keep you all day. But maybe we'll do it once more at some point. And uh, any links that we talked about here to your master classes and books or whatever you want, I'm gonna put that in the description, so anyone watching this can just go there straight away and check it out. So again, thank you so much. Is there anything you want to add, or
Thanks, John.
anything we missed?
I appreciate the conversation. It touched on some things that I think are interesting, and a lot of the deeper truths that kind of get missed. You know,
Yeah,
hopefully this will be useful to a few people out there. And yeah,
I'm
so
sure. I'm very sure
happy
of that. So yeah, thank you so much, and see you next time.